Stop enjoying yourselves. Stop enjoying yourselves. Okay. Welcome back. It struck me we should give a wonderful round of applause to Josh here. I mean, what a stoic hero right here. He has just raised the bar for commitment to the cause. Basically, even if your leg is surrounded with what looks like an aeroplane fuselage, you're still expected to be here. What a hero. We've got a few notices, but before we start the notices, I want to just, you will have heard some news coming out of Iran. It's been a difficult place for a long time. It's particularly difficult at the moment. I want to tell you just a short story about a certain lady. She lived in Iran, and she began to get interested in Jesus. And so she got hold of a Bible somehow, and she started to develop a faith in Jesus. Now, she was at work one time. She manages a port. And she was at work, and her neighbor saw that the police were at her house, come to arrest her. And her neighbor rang her up and said, just leave. And she had to, at that point, leave the country. She didn't see her husband after that point, and she didn't say goodbye to her children. And she left, and she got to the UK. You know it's a tough journey when you're in a container and you don't know how you got to the UK. You know that's a hard journey at that point. She arrived and she had £10, and someone said to her, go to a vineyard church and they'll look after you. And so, as it happened, midway through a service about 7 years ago, this lady turned up here with 2 plastic bags, that's all she owned, and £10. And she made a decision. She said to herself, I want to go to a non-Iranian church so as to sort of integrate with the British culture. She spoke literally no words of English apart from hello. And recently, last Wednesday, Zeba became a British citizen. Come here. Come here. To you.
Thank you.
Bless you. We love you, Zeba.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone. And thank you for 7 years I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And every people helped me. Karen and Alex. So, thank you. Because when I come here, no speak English, no understand everything. Now, a little bit. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for this church. Thank you.
Wonderful. All other notices pale into insignificance. It is downhill from here on. But I would wish to remind you, if you haven't heard already, that we, this church, are having our 10th birthday party. And that's going to happen on the 23rd of October. It's, what's that, 3 weeks? You must come here, otherwise I will go to your door and drag you here. It will be, I happen to know, a wonderful, wonderful event. And so it's at Sunday at 10 o'clock here. Bring your friends, bring your neighbors, bring people who you just have no idea who they are. There is going to be Prosecco. So all good. Something else is our life groups are they have reopened. You can now sign up. Don't do it right now. I've got a little talk to give first. But when you get home, you can sign up to a life group. It's what we call a house group or a cell group or something like that. Except we don't meet in cells. We meet in houses. So we call we do life together. That's why we call it a life group. Forgot that bit. Right, anyway, you can sign up. If you go to sheffieldvineyard.org, at the top of the screen, you can see where it says Life Group Sign Up. Click on that and you can find out where they are, who leads it, times, etc., etc. Students, if you're a student, you are welcome to come back to Karen and my house straight after this service. We can give you lifts, so just hang around and we'll give you a lift. And we can get to know you and have a nice little chat with you, perhaps tell you a little bit more about our church family here. And then at 7:30, tell me if I get this wrong, on the 4th of October, which is a Tuesday, yes, Joe and Lucy have invited you to their house for some dinner, some games, that sort of stuff. So if you want to find out exactly where they live, collar them right now. Not right now, a bit later on. They'll tell you. We next notice is we have changed bank accounts for a few reasons, which I won't bore you with. But what that means is, if you have been giving to the church, I think that someone will have asked you to change where you give your money to. We'd like it to go to the new bank account and not to the bank account that we have no connection with anymore. More specifically, we need anyone who is currently giving and who is a taxpayer. We'd like to, if you haven't done already, we'd like you to sign what's called a gift aid form. That means that for every £1 you give to the church, because you're a taxpayer, we get an additional 20p. When those pounds are knocked together, that's a lot more money. And so we've got some forms. I've brought them along. I've actually forgotten to put them on the table, but I will do. So can you take one of those forms when you leave? In fact, don't take it when you leave. You can simply sign it and then leave and give it to Rachel. Wave Rachel. Rachel will take that. So it does not cost you any more to sign that form. We just get more money from the government, and that's always a good thing. Cause to live for is, this is one of the highlights of the Vineyard year is Cause to live for. It's going from the 18th to the 19th of November. It's basically when many Vineyard churches across the nation, of which there are 120 odd, the youth, the young people, get together for one heck of a shindig at Trent Vineyard. We go every year, a whole bunch of us go every single year, and it is wild, it is loud, and it is God-filled. It's absolutely amazing. If you are sort of a student or that sort of, 20s, 30s, that sort of thing, make that your priority. You will thank me for that. There's a small fee. It's wage 35, students 30. If that's too much for you, I will pay for your ticket personally. Okay, that's how much I think it's really worth you going. Lastly, this is last on my list, it's one of the most wonderful things is going to happen on the 14th of October, because Lydia and Josh are getting married. Where are they? Where is he? He's already left. He's on kids' duty. We'll forgive him for that. Josh was playing the guitar here. Lydia's sat here. They are getting married on the 14th of October at 2 p.m. in St. Michael's Church, Hathersage, and there is an open invitation for you to attend that service. So if you'd like to come along and see them get married, you may do so. I'm looking forward to that so much. I really am. Great speaker, apparently. That's very good. Right. Yeah, Carrie. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Now, sermon is starting. I'm an architect, and one of the things I most like about my job is when I invest so much time and energy into a building, and then it's like the final open day, and I love going through the door and smelling the fresh white paint, and it's got the Arnie Jacobsen chrome taps in the kitchen. There's a neutral coloured, carpet, pristine. And there'll be some Hans Wegner chairs around a table and a purposefully positioned mug to make it look incredibly homely. And it all looks absolutely wonderful. However, if you would have gone to that building just a few weeks before, it would have looked very, very different. It would have been a construction site. It would have been messy and noisy and chaotic. And so it is with God's church on earth and our relationship with him. When Jesus returns, all will be complete. All will be in order and looking absolutely wonderful. But at the moment, we're in the construction stage. And it's a bit messy because there is work to be done. Now, the work that has been going on is taking a considerable length of time. And there have been moments in history where the work looks very incomplete indeed. And in fact, it appears as though some parts of the work needs to be basically, deconstructed and reconstructed again in order for it to progress anymore. I'll give you an example. We had an extension happen at my house, and the builders, God bless them, built a ground floor wall not in alignment. And it had to be, once they left, it had to be removed and rebuilt before anything above it could be constructed. And that's a bit like how the construction work was like in the church and in terms of people's relationship with God when we look at the biblical book of Ezra. That's what it was like. It was mid-construction, and there needed to be some deconstruction before there could be any construction which would allow, God's big plan to create a great and wonderful global church to happen. Now, the biblical books of Ezra and Nehemiah were originally a single manuscript, probably all written by Ezra, and it's set in the wake of the Babylonians having just invaded Jerusalem and taken back a whole bunch of Jews back to Babylon. And the Babylons completely destroyed Jerusalem, including the temple, and they'd taken all the Jews back. But the book, the singular book of Ezra and Nehemiah, is more than just an historical account of town planning and architecture, of which is incredibly exciting in of itself. It's more than that. It's a story of the return of the Jews back to Jerusalem and then their rebuilding of a city, and in particular, the temple. It's more than even that. It's a story of the rebuilding of a spiritual relationship between the Jews and their God. And I think that there is much for us to learn by reading the book today. I think that there is a need in God's church today to deepen its spiritual relationship with God. And we here in the Vineyard are part of that global church. It applies to us. And my sense is that we, along with all the other churches that I've sort of been chatting with over the last few years, we've felt the strain of separation during the COVID pandemic, which has meant that there are some people are not here today who were here before. And it also means that there are some people here who, if I'm going to be entirely honest with you, have found it more difficult to connect with God and connect with his church. And as we move in, we've sort of moved into this new era where it's easy to turn God on as we open up the laptop and then turn him off as we fancy a cup of tea. Apart from Josh. He's the obvious exception. And my gut feeling is, as we need to sort of push into this greater sense of discipleship, to deepen our dependency again on God. Now, I hope I don't come across as a school teacher. I don't want to be Miss Battle Axe. So firstly here, listen to this. I don't think I'm any better than anyone else here, okay? I'm preaching to myself as much as I am to you. And secondly, I completely understand that we've had a very, very hard time. It has not been easy. We face challenges, and we still do. And our context means, I think, that it's simply harder, in some regards, to follow Jesus now than it has ever been. It's certainly the case that it's more important now than ever before that we need to make every attempt to deepen our dependency on him. Christian discipleship is the process of deepening our dependency on Christ such that we look Christ-like. And my hope is that in this little series of 6 talks on Ezra, we would see more clearly the need and the benefit of discipleship and how we can practically move to become better disciples. I've printed on double side. I have no idea. Have I missed a page out? Yeah, but I seem to be on page 4, and I'm pretty sure. Have I? It was all going so well in my head. I thought I was winning. I've missed quite a substantial chunk out of... I will seamlessly step back to the history of the Jews, because I've missed some important stuff. We can miss that, but that's boring in any case. Let's go on. Here's an important bit. Right. God had to do some deconstructing. Remember I talked about deconstructing, right? God was doing some deconstructing in order to do some reconstructing. Right? Remember that bit again. Now, why? Why did he do that? Well, or how? No, actually, the question is really how. And how he did it was he enabled the Jewish people to go into exile. And he enabled the Babylonians to capture the Jews. But, and here's the bit that I missed out, but God had in mind all along a bigger plan. It wasn't that he was just, spiteful and horrible. It's like spanking people because they've done something terribly wrong. It wasn't. God's not like that. He had a plan. And his plan was to, through the process of being in captivity, that the Jews might see the error of their ways. You see, there was a purpose for them being held captive. And his plan was that they would, as a result of that, say, oh God, we've done terrible things. We've ignored all of your prophets, which you sent time and time again to tell us that we should change what we do and who we are to worship. We've ignored them all. We now realize that that's a terrible thing that we've done, and we are sorry, and we want to come back. We now are aware that this mess that really we've got ourselves into, because when people separate themselves from God, being away from God is not a nice place to be. That was God's intention. And we know this, and we know that it was God's intention to bring the Jews back out of captivity, back to Jerusalem, because all of this, before all of it ever happened, this is what he wrote through a prophet Jeremiah. It's in Jeremiah 29:10. God said this: when 70 years are complete for Babylon, in other words, 70 years means a generation. Like when the last person who's experienced it has forgotten about it because they're dead. After that, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So it was always God's plan to bring the Jews both actually into exile and then out after about 70 years, or a lifetime. And the whole book of Ezra and Nehemiah, it was written in the wake of them being put into captivity, and it's a historical account of them coming out of captivity, returning back to Jerusalem and restoring the city and restoring the temple. And it happened in stages. And that single book, Ezra and Nehemiah, it basically follows the path of three people who led the rebuilding effort. First of all, you've got Zerubbabel, and then you've got Ezra, and then you've got Nehemiah. Now, if you were to pick up the Bible today, what you'll probably see is the two distinct books, Ezra and Nehemiah. And Ezra captures the rebuilding effort of both Zerubbabel and Ezra. And Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, captures the building efforts of guess who? Yes, that's right. It was Nehemiah. So, and if you'd like to have a good look at a good overview, there's a 5-minute video on a website called thebibleproject.com. It's a great little, quick overview. So, I've said all of that. So, let's start with this. I want to read you now. We're going to go through Ezra, and we're going to look at snippets, key moments, salient points of the big narrative as we travel through. And today we're going to look at chapter 1, just the first 5 verses. It's coming up on the screen, but this is chapter 1 of Ezra, verses 1 to 5. It says this: In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved in the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to also put it into writing. And this is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem in Judea. Any of his people among us may go up to Jerusalem in Judea and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. He goes on a little bit, and then he continues. When the family heads of Judea and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. So, shortly after the Babylonians captured the Jews, the Babylonian Empire was itself overthrown by the Persian Empire, led by Cyrus, King Cyrus. And it wasn't long after Cyrus was in effect in charge of the Jews that he started to say this stuff, and he sort of started to give people the invitation to go back. What we see here is a rather unusual move. It's, I would suggest, unusual, certainly unusual in those days, that if you've just won a war, you normally keep people captive for your own purposes. What you don't normally say is, and now everyone can go home again. That's a bit odd. We know that he made a huge U-turn, in effect. Why? Because it says here that the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus. I mean, it's not something he would have otherwise done. And what we can see here is that God is in control of all situations and all people, even those who don't follow him. Because Cyrus didn't follow Yahweh, the God of the Jews, our God. He didn't. And what we see here is it's a demonstration of what Paul wrote in Romans 8:28, that God is in control of all human affairs. He works through all people, in all situations, all the time, for the good of those who love him, and very often for the good of those who don't love him. He can, and he does, use all aspects of life to bring us back to him. The other thing is that Cyrus rather pompously, I thought, claimed that God had given him, did you notice it? That God's given me all of the kingdoms of the earth, is what he said. I suspect that's not quite true. And you know, that God called him to start this, you know, rebuilding project. You know, he's sort of fluffing his wings up a bit. You know, look at me, isn't he? But what we also see is that God moved his heart, and he moved the hearts of some of the Jews who are in exile. Did you see that last bit where it says, and then the heads' families of Judah and Benjamin and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved. You know, they went off and did all the building work. And look, my point here is that when life is hard and we feel anxiety and fear and worry, just as the Jews would have felt, it's sometimes easy to forget that God is with us and working behind the scenes for our good. My simple point that God is always with us. He may not decide to make life easy for us all the time, but he does always travel with us no matter where we go. I want to tell you a little story about an airplane. Jim O'Neill is a pilot, and on one flight in his small Cessna 182 plane, about an hour after taking off, his vision failed. It transpires afterwards that he had a stroke, and as a result of that, he couldn't see. He's the only person in the plane, and it's him alone, and he was flying blind, quite literally. O'Neill fumbled around. He located his radio, and he sent out a Mayday alert, which was picked up by air traffic control, and they in turn contacted a local RAF base, and Wing Commander Paul Gerard was assigned to take off, find O'Neill, and help him to land safely. So not long later, Wing Commander Gerard found O'Neill flying the plane, and he got alongside them. In the air, the two of the airplanes alongside each other, and they were able to talk to each other via the radio. And Gerard, he said, go a bit to the left, a bit to the right, up a bit, down a bit. And he brought O'Neill to a runway, a nearby runway. And he said to O'Neill, can you see the runway? It's right in front of you. And O'Neill said, no, negative, I cannot see the runway. And so Gerard, he issued these little instructions to enable O'Neill to make a descent and land the aeroplane. On the first attempt, the airplane made contact with the ground, but bounced up, and they had to do it again. That happened a further 6 times. But on the 8th attempt, O'Neill made a near perfect landing, completely blind. Later, O'Neill said that when he realized he couldn't see, he was terrified and owes his life to Wing Commander Gerard and his instructions. You and I might not be in a position whereby we are in imminent danger of death, but, there are plenty of pressures that we experience and challenges that we face that cause us significant anxiety and fear and worry. And for some, it might feel as though we're flying a plane, blind, worried that we're going to crash. And my point is, we have Wing Commander God, who is traveling with us, who can see ahead, even if we can't see ahead. And he wants us to live. He wants us to live life to the full. And all we need to do is to listen and to obey his instructions. I sometimes think that we say the wrong prayer. I'm speaking personally. I sometimes say the wrong prayer myself. And maybe you're a bit like me. The type of prayer that I might say is, Lord, I've got lots of problems. Please take them all away. And and sometimes actually God does do that. I mean, I believe that God is a God of miracles, and he can and often does. At the click of a finger, it takes all my problems away. Instant miracles happen. That might be, I've seen someone walk out of a wheelchair. I've seen someone come in this room with a walking stick, an elderly person with a walking stick, and then walk out and said, I've got nothing to do with this walking stick anymore. Do you want it? Sometimes God does that, and sometimes he doesn't. And I think sometimes a better prayer for us to ask is not, will you just take away all of my problems, please, in an instant. It's, will you please be with me in this time of difficulty that I've got? That's actually a very clever prayer. It might be that God chooses not to take all of our problems away in an instant because he wants to teach us some things. He wants to develop us and equip us and make us to be the person who he's always wanted us to be. And actually that means we need to go through a bit of a process. It's not that he hates us, it's not that he can't hear us, it's not that he's absent. It's a bit like when he was with the Jews. There's some construction work to be done. And it might even be that there's some deconstruction work that has to be done before any construction work needs to carry on. That's not a judgment. That's just, we're human. We're all the same. We're all like that. And you'll have your set of issues and I'll have mine. We're all broken, but in different ways. Yes, some of us are more evident, you could say. But my point is this: it's better to be with God in troubled times than to be away from God in times of ease. Tweet that. Someone tweet that. I came up with that all by myself. I'm very proud. It's better to be with God in times of trouble than to be away from God in times of ease. And here's something that we can remember when we're going through one of these processes. This is what Jesus literally said. He said, "You can be sure that I will be with you always." Matthew 28:20. And if it weren't clear, and if it weren't enough, he also said, not only that, I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever, referring to the Holy Spirit. That's John 14:16. I mean, either he's lying to us or he's not. How do we do Christian discipleship? How do we become more Christ-like? Well, we learn to trust that God will be with us every day, in every way, in all circumstances, irrespective of whether we see him or feel him or not. He rushes towards us in times of emergency, when we give out that cry of help. Oh my goodness me, what's going on? God, please. He rushes towards us. He's in control of our context, just as he was in control of the context of the Jews when they were held in captivity in Babylon. He knew he had the big plan already organized and set out even before it happened. It wasn't like, oh my goodness me, they've been held captive. I need to come up with a plan. No, he knew everything in advance. Just as Cyrus, king of Persia, said, any of his people, referring to God's people, among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judea and build a temple of the Lord. Just as he said that, God says the same to us today. And he journeys with us as we go home, as we travel, to heaven. Or as actually, technically, I think, as heaven travels home to us here. That's another sermon. Look, I just think now would be a wonderful time for us to pray in response to some of all of that. Why don't you stand up for a start? You're with me on this, are you? Fantastic, yes. We're going to have a moment whereby we just reflect on perhaps some of the stuff that you've got going on, that that gives you anxiety and worries, and we're going to have a moment of quiet, really, and we're going to hand it over to God, and we're going to remember some of the truths as we do that. That he's with us. Wing Commander God is right beside us. So let's just have a time of quiet. Close your eyes. You might feel it just comfortable just to put your hands out, as if God's going to give you some sort of a gift, a present. As if God might give you his presence. Come, Spirit. Come and minister to us.